What's up guys, my name's Brandon and today Apple surprisingly releases iOS 13.1 Beta 1 to registered developers about a week after the release of iOS 13 Beta 8. So yes, a very unexpected release, and in this video we're going to explain why Apple pushed out this version so quickly before the final release of iOS 13, and of course we're also going to discuss the new features, the new changes, the performance, all that fun stuff found in iOS 13.1. So starting off with the size of this update, you can see here it came in at about 444 megabytes on my iPhone XR. It came in at 2.78 gigabytes on my iPhone 6s, and that's because I was on beta 7 and not beta 8. So if you weren't on the latest build of iOS 13.0, it is going to be a pretty large sized update. And then over here on the iPad, you can see it came in at about 437 megabytes, which I was on the latest beta from this one as well. So pretty big update all around the board on all devices. You can expect at least a minimum of 400 megabytes. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at the build number, if we go to our settings, general about, you can see it does say 13.1 there. You can see the build number 17A5821E. So we went from an A build to an E build. So that means that we are definitely going to have quite a few betas of iOS 13.1 as expected. So before we get into why Apple released iOS 13.1, let's go ahead and discuss some of the new features and changes found inside iOS 13.1. So the first new feature I found in iOS 13.1 is this one right here. You can see in the volume HUD when you turn the volume up when you're listening to AirPods, or if you have like, some of the Bose headphones or whatever headphones you have, anything that's not just playing audio out of your speakers on your iPhone will actually show the icon for whatever's playing the audio inside of the volume HUD. So like if you had a HomePod, it would probably show the HomePod in there. As you can see, I had AirPods, so it shows the little AirPods icons there. Looks really nice. We didn't have that in previous versions of iOS 13, but it would show something very similar inside of the control center. Now here's one that a lot of people are going to be excited about. If we go back to our settings and go to General, go to fonts, you can see that we now have a new little screen here that says no fonts installed. You can download apps and install fonts from the App Store. So yes, fonts are now enabled in iOS 13.1. So a lot of people were messaging me, leaving comments on iOS 13.0 throughout all the betas saying, where are the fonts? Why can't we install fonts? That was a big feature. So let me show you what it looked like in iOS 13. So we have iOS 13 on the left, iOS 13.1 on the right. You can see there, big difference. It just says basically you can't install fonts on the left-hand side in iOS 13, but now in iOS 13.1, you can. Now here's another one I know a lot of people are going to be excited about. So you guys remember in iOS 13.0, when you would go and do the three-finger gesture right here, and it would pop up at the top. You can see there it pops up when you tap and hold. And it's like the cut, copy, paste, and all that. That would be actually really irritating and it would basically break games like PUBG. When you would have to use three-finger gestures, it would pull that up and it would mess you up in the game. Well, now in iOS 13.1, if you three-finger tap on the home screen, you can see nothing pops up. No matter how long I hold it there, nothing pops up. So it seems that iOS 13.1 fixed this issue, and I tried it out in a game as well on PUBG on my iPad, and everything works perfectly now. So if you were having issues, if you really didn't like the three-finger gestures there and it got in the way of things you were doing, you will be happy with iOS 13.1 because it does fix that. Now if we go into our notes and three-finger tap, you can see that it does pop up there. So it's getting a lot smarter now, and it knows when you're in an application that actually needs to cut, copy, paste, or undo or whatever, and you could do it inside of the Notes application. Now if we 3D touch on the settings icon, you can see the battery in the 3D touch menu here is a lot bigger in iOS 13.1. You can see the order of things is a little bit different as well, but the battery icon is the first thing I noticed that looks a lot different in iOS 13.1 versus iOS 13.0 over here on the left side. And there are some other changes on icons as well, but nothing too major. Now if we go into our settings and go to wallpapers, now if we go to our dynamic wallpapers, you will see that there are a lot more dynamic wallpapers now in iOS 13.1 versus iOS 13.0. So if you are into dynamic wallpapers, you will like that you have more of a variety of things to choose from now as far as wallpapers go. We finally get the automation tab back in the shortcuts application now in iOS 13.1. You can see it was missing on the latest build of iOS 13 beta, and as I predicted in previous videos that I thought that the automation tab would come back in 13.1 or 13.0.1, and sure enough it did. Now also the share ETA in your maps has also come back. That was also missing in beta 8. But unfortunately, one thing that did not come back is announce messages with Siri, which sucks because that was one of my favorite features overall in iOS 13. You can see here in the control center, it does not show it anywhere. And even if we go to our notifications here, there's usually something at the top that says announce messages with Siri, but that is not there even in 13.1. So I don't know when Apple's going to bring that back. I hope it's in the final build of 13.1 because again, I love that feature, especially when I would ride my bike. It would be very handy. So hopefully they bring that back, but it's not here in iOS 13.1 Beta 1. So now, why was iOS 13.1 released so early on and before the actual release of iOS 13? Well, as I retweeted on Twitter earlier today, it's likely because iOS 13.0 is already locked in for release, and Apple is moving on quickly to iOS 13.1 to fix up some of the bugs and issues that they are pretty much knowingly going to have in the final release of iOS 13.0. So iOS 13 Beta 8 is about as stable as iOS 13 is going to get until iOS 13.1 comes out, which will definitely be a lot more stable, of course, than iOS 13.0. Apple is pushing out 13.0 pretty much knowing, like I said, that there are going to be bugs and there are going to be issues, which is the whole reason they're releasing iOS 13 Beta 1 so early, so that we can get a jump on it and make sure it's as stable as possible, so that we can get that maybe like a month after the release of iOS 13. So yeah, it's kind of strange, and Apple doesn't do this very often, but it will be interesting to see how iOS 13.0 performs on the final release, especially on the new iPhones. I'll be very curious to see how it is, and if we're still missing like the automation tab and all that, which I expect we will, but it will just be interesting to see, especially when we have our hands on iOS 13.1 already. Now, when it comes to the performance of iOS 13.1, like I mentioned, it's probably going to be a lot more stable than iOS 13.0, but of course, it's still too early to tell. I've only been using it for about an hour now. Everything does feel fluid. I mean, everything, the animations, the multitasking, going in and out of applications, everything seems fine, but of course it's still early. I will be making a follow-up video either later this week or early next week to tell you guys just how much better or worse, or if it's the same as iOS 13.0, so definitely stay tuned for that. Make sure you are subscribed and stay tuned for that video. But the same thing goes with battery life as well. Battery life for me on iOS 13.0 was fine. I never had really any issues on Beta 8. I did have some battery issues early on, but in Beta 8, really the past few betas of iOS 13.0, battery life has been really good for me on my daily driver, my iPhone XS Max over here. Same with my XR, same with my iPad. Really no complaints. So I cannot imagine iOS 13.1 would make that any worse. I would say that it would get better if anything, but of course I will report back in my follow-up video on that. Now, one bug that I instantly noticed in iOS 13.1 is that you cannot adjust the photos when you go to set your wallpaper. So you can see here iOS 13 Beta 8 on my left, iOS 13.1 on the right. You cannot adjust the photos, so that can be very annoying to some of you who want to set backgrounds and not have it just the preset, how it's preset cropped. So you can't actually move it around in iOS 13.1, which can be kind of annoying. I haven't really noticed any other bugs though, but of course I'm sure I will run into some after using this on my daily driver device, my iPhone XS Max over here. So I will report back in my follow-up video if I find any other bugs. Of course, I will report them inside of the feedback application as well, which I'm sure you guys are doing. If not, make sure to report any and all bugs inside of the feedback application. Apple is always working to fix that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for iOS 13.1 Beta 1. If you are on the iOS 13 betas right now, I would definitely recommend updating to iOS 13.1. You will get some additional new features. You will get some things back like the automations tab, your share ETA and maps, and you will probably also have better battery life, better performance. Of course, I don't know that for sure yet. I've only been using it for a short amount of time, but I will report back in my follow-up video, but I would assume it would be better. So definitely go ahead and update if you are on the beta program, if you do have the developer profile installed. Public beta testers, you should be seeing this soon as well. And of course, I will post that on Twitter when it does go live for you public beta testers. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about iOS 13.1. Let me know about your theories of why you think it was released. It could also have something to do with Apple already sending out, their batch of the new iPhones that come with iOS 13.0 on them. And Apple wants iOS 13.1 to be an update available shortly after those new iPhones get released. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons Apple would release iOS 13.1. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Also, let me know if you found any other new features and changes in iOS 13.1 down in the comment section below. If you guys did enjoy this video as well, make sure to give it a thumbs up and of course subscribe so you don't miss my follow-up video and iOS 13.1 Beta 2 and however many other betas there are. I will be covering all of those betas here on the channel. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching the video, and I'll see you soon.